Kiddushin Daf Yud Zayin begins with a brief conclusion of a discussion about an Eved Ivri who was sick and couldn't work. Does he go free as other Eved Ivris would? Then we'll talk about Hanaka. Then we'll discuss what the amount is. A brisa with three opinions. We'll analyze their sources. And then we'll get into the concept of inheriting an Eved Ivri. So let's begin. The Gemara has quoted a brisa recently that said that an Eved Ivri goes free at the end of 6 years, even if he was sick during those 6 years and he didn't get a chance to work. He doesn't have to make it up afterwards. So the Gemara asks, that implies that even if he was sick for all 6 years, that contradicts the brisa which we have that says that if he was sick for 3 years and he worked for 3 years, then he goes free at the end of 6 years. He doesn't have to make up the 3 years that he missed. However, if he was sick for all 6 years, then he has to make it up. That contradicts our brisa. So Rav Sheshes answers our brisa that says that he does not have to make it up. Is talking about that he was able to work even though he was sick, that he worked at, let's say, needlepoint, or he sewed, and that is not a very strenuous job, and therefore he's able to do that even in his illness. Now the Gemara analyzes the brisa itself. The brisa said that if he was sick for 3 years, he doesn't have to make it up. If he was sick for 6 years, then he has to make it up. What about 4 years? You have conflicting implications. 3 years he has to make it up implies 4. 3 years he does not have to make it up implies 4 he does. 6 years he does have to make it up implies 4 he does not. Contradiction. The Gemara says no. Anything more than 3 years you have to make it up. And the way you read it is, if it's 3 years you don't have to make it up. If it's 4 years, it's as if he was out for all 6 years, and then you do have to make it up. Alright, that concludes that discussion. Now the Gemara goes into Hanaka. So Hanaka is a gift you have to give an Eved. The Torah says, when you send them from you, don't send them away empty-handed. That's the Eved. You give him a gift from your sheep, from your granary, and from your vineyards, from your wine. That Hashem blessed you with, you should give to him. So the Gemara is going to bring a brisa which analyzes this pasuk in order to come up with what the amount is. So the brisa brings 3 opinions as to how much this Hanaka is. The first opinion is Rabbi Meir. He says you have to give 5 slime from each of the 3 things mentioned. He said Tzayin, Geirin, and Yaakov. 5 slime. The 5 slime comes from a pidyon haben, which is 5 slime. 5 from each, which Rabbi Meir says is a total of 15. The Gemara will explain why he's doing math for us. Rabbi Yehuda says it's 30, just like a Eved who is killed by a Shar Hamua. The halacha is that the owner of the Shar has to pay 30 for the Eved, so that's how much the Hanaka is. And the third opinion is Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says it's 50, like the highest erech. When someone pledges his erech, the highest amount, depending on his age and gender, is 50. So he's got to pay those 50 shkal. So now the Gemara wants to know what are the sources for each of them. So the Gemara first quotes Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir had said 5 for each, the Ger and the Yaakov and the Tzayin, for a total of 15. The Gemara says, why is he doing math for us? The Gemara says that's to tell you that you have to have at least a total of 15. It doesn't matter that you have 5 of each. The 15 total is what we're interested in. It doesn't matter if you actually took from the Tzayin 5, from the Gerin 5, and from the Yaakov 5. Now, the Gemara says, what is Rabbi Meir as a source? So the Gemara says he has a Gzir Shava from the word Reikam. It says, V'chisa Shechenu Reikam, and it says that as well by Pidyon Haben, and therefore it says, Hu Petach Mar Tifte B'seh, V'mois Tifte V'rafte, Kol B'char B'nech Tifte, V'loi Yeru Fanai Reikam. Reikam, both are the same amount. There it says 5 slime, so here it's got to be 5 slime as well. So the Gemara says, maybe it's 5 slime total. I know it's 5 slime for each. So the Gemara answers, because first it says, V'chisa Shechenu Reikam, and then afterwards it says, that means that that's going back on the 5 slime, and it's saying for each of these you got to have 5 slime. The 5 slime applies on each of those. Now the Gemara says Reikam appears somewhere else. Reikam appears in the concept of an Oila Suriyah, carbon arila that somebody brings along when he goes to be either regel, and that only has to be 2 slime. So what do we learn from there? So it says Asher Berachacha Hashem Leikacha, you should give from what Hashem blessed you with, and therefore you should use the larger amount. Alright, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Now Rabbi Yehuda had said 30, like the 30 of an Eved. So the Gemara says, what is Rabbi Yehuda's source? So the Gemara says, it's a different Gzir Shava. It says Nesina. It says the word Titain here, and it says the word Titain also concerning the Eved. It says, Evediga Chashar, Oy Amal Kesef Shkolim, Shloishim Shkolim Yitain L'Adainav. So there you got 30 Shkolim, and it says word Yitain. So that is learned to here, where it says, Asher Berachacha Hashem Leikacha Titain Loi. Now, The Gemara says, why don't you learn from Erchen? Erchen, it also says the word Nisina. It says, V'nasan esa erkecha. So why do you learn to there? And it should be 50. So the Gemara answers, two answers. First of all, we have a rule, tafasta merubah tafasta. You always choose the smaller. If you have two things you could choose, you always choose the smaller. Second of all, when you're talking about an Eved, we should learn to another Eved. We're talking about Tanakh of an Eved. We should learn from the goring of an Eved. We shouldn't go to a carbon which is not related. Okay, third opinion was Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon said 50 slime, learned from Erchen. And then the Gemara wants to know what is his reasoning. So Mar first says he also learns Gzeir Shav and Nesina, but he goes to Erchen. He says it links Hanaka to Erchen, just like Erchen, the highest Erech is 50, so here also going to go with 50. So Mar asks why the highest Erech, maybe we should choose the lowest Erech. So Mar says no, it says Asher Beirachecha Hashem Alekecha, that means you should display bracha, and therefore you should use the higher amount. So then the Gemara asks, so learn from Eved, where it's 30. And the Gemara continues with what we said before, the reasons to learn from Eved. First of all, tafasta merubah tafasta. Second of all, Eved from Eved, you should learn. So what's the Hashem going to do with those arguments? The Gemara says, because he has a pasuk in Micha. The pasuk in Micha uses the word ki yamach alchicha imach. And here we have imachu me'arkecha. So therefore, we link of the Eved to the Erech. And from there we learn, you should learn the amounts of Hanaka from an Eved from the Erchen. Okay, now the Gemara has a question generally. The Gemara says, according to Rabbi Meir, I understand why it says Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov to teach me 5 from each. According to Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, why does it spell out Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov? The Gemara explains it for the following drasha, which teaches me what materials you should use for this Hanaka. So the drasha says as follows. It says Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov. So you may think I have to use only Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov, not anything else. Therefore it says, Asher Beirachecha Hashem Alekecha, you can use any bracha that Hashem gave you. So why does it say Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov? To limit it. It has to be something which is similar to Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov, and bracha. That is, it should be something which grows, something which displays bracha. Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov all display bracha, and therefore you should take something which displays bracha more than Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov, but not something which does not have bracha. Like what? So Shimon ben Elazar says to exclude money, which doesn't grow. Shimon says that. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says to exclude mules, which don't have children. They don't have bracha. They don't display fruitfulness. So the Gemara says, why does Rabbi Shimon not like mules? He says, even though mules don't have children, but they do grow on their own. So you do see bracha there. Why does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov not like money? So he says, money can grow. Money you can do business with, and then it can increase. So therefore he says that is something which displays bracha. So now the Gemara says, why do you have to have all 3? Tzayin, Gairin, and Yaakov, just choose one. So the Gemara says, you need a Chiddush in each of them. If it would only say Tzayin, you would think it has to be a living creature, like an animal from the animal kingdom, and not something which is a plant, and therefore it has to say Gairin. Now, if it would only say Gairin, you would think it has to be a plant, and not something which is living, and therefore it has to say Tzayin. Why does it have to say Yaakov? If I have Tzayin and Gairin already, that is to exclude the things which don't display bracha. According to one, it's money. According to the other, it's mules. Okay, another one brings another brayso that says Asher Beirachecha Hashem Alekecha. That would seem to imply you only have to give a bracha to an Eved who caused a bracha on your house. That is, he brought prosperity to you. So to make sure that that is not a wrong halacha that we would learn, it says Hanik Tanik, a double lashon of Hanik. No matter what he did, you should give him a Hanaka anyway. So why does it say Asher Beirachecha? So the Gemara says, first opinion is that you should give him more if he brought you more bracha. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, no, this entire thing is not correct. You only give if he actually gave bracha to your house. If he didn't bring bracha to your house, you don't give him hanaka at all. Why does it say hanik tanik? That's just the way people speak, and the Torah was medaber kalash and bnei adam. The Gemara now discusses the inheritance of an Eved Ivri. So the Gemara quotes a brayso that says an Eved Ivri, a male Eved, can be inherited by a son only, not other relatives. Now, the daughter or brother cannot inherit the Eved Ivri. And Alma Ivriya is not inherited by anybody. If the master dies, she goes free. And in Eved Ivri, who extended after 6 years, and Nirtza is also not inherited by anybody. Someone who sold to a guy is not inherited by anyone either. So the only one that's inherited is an Eved Ivri in the first 6 years, and inherited only by a son, not by anybody else. Samara asks, what's the source for that? So where it says, the Rabbanan, we have a brayso that says as follows. It says, V'avadcha sheish shanim says he should serve you 6 years, you and not an inheritor. So the Gemara says, Hadina means you and not your inheritor. Maybe it means you and not the son. When we say it's you and not inheritor, we mean a different inheritor other than the son. Maybe it means not the son. So Gemara says, no, but there is a pasuk that implies that he is inherited by someone, because it says Sheish Shanim Ya'avoid, doesn't say Sheish Shanim Ya'avadcha. So one place it says Ya'avadcha, shouldn't serve you. One place it says Ya'avoid, you should serve in general. So you're including somebody, and you're excluding somebody. So how do you know who to exclude and who to exclude? So the Gemara says you should include that he can serve the son, because the son takes the place of the father. Where do you find that? In Yud, if the Adain doesn't want to marry an Amavriya, he can have his son take his place and marry the Amavriya. Same thing applies for a Ste'achuza. If a field is Makdish, becomes Hekdish, it has to be redeemed in order to prevent it becoming lost to the family forever. The original owner can redeem it, or the son can redeem it. No one else would prevent that from happening. So redeemed by anyone else, then it's lost. So Gemara says, you see these two ways in which the son takes the place of the father, and therefore you're going to say that the son takes the place of the father to inherit the Eved, as opposed to anyone else. Gemara asks, what do you mean? You see that the brother takes the place of his brother as his inheritor. Where do you see that? Yibum. The brother steps in for Yibum. So when you say the brother, therefore, he's the one who really takes the place, so he should be the one to inherit. So the Gemara says, the brother only does Yibum if there's no son. So you see the son really has precedence over the brother in taking the place of the nifter. So the Gemara says, why don't you give a different answer? Why don't you answer, here there's two factors. Here you have Yid and Ste'achuza. The brother, you only have one. So the Gemara says, no, because Yid itself and Ste'achuza, so Ste'achuza itself was learned from the same cheshbon, from the same fact that it is and the son takes the place of his father by Yid. So therefore it's really only counts as one. The Ste'achuza doesn't count as a different thing. The Gemara now moves on to discuss the Amavriya. So the Brayos had said that an Amavriya is not inherited by anybody. So what's the source for that? So Rabbi Pada says it's learned out of an Eved Hanirtza, an Eved who overstayed his 6 years, had the whole man in his ear. On him it says explicitly Va'avada, he only serves him and he doesn't serve his inheritors. So at the end of the pasuk about Hanirtza it says Va'afla maschal taschin, you should do the same thing to your Amma. That is not to teach that an Amma also has a Ritziyah process, because it said Ve'im Amar Yemar Ha'eved. The entire process of Ritziyah only applies to an Eved, not to an Amma. So what does it mean? Afla maschal taschin? Just like a Nirtza cannot be inherited, an Amavriya also cannot be inherited. Samara asks, but that's used for a different drasha. We have a brisa that says that Afla Mascha Tasakain, how do you know what that's to teach? It can't be to teach a Ritziyah, could be by an Amma, because like we said, it says Im Amar Yemar Ha'eved. So it must be to teach Hanaka, to teach that she gets Hanaka. Hanaka is the pasuk just before Ritziyah. That Hanaka applies to an Amavriya as well. So Gemara says there's two drashas, because it could have said Af Mascha Kain. Why Afla Mascha Tasa Kain? That's to teach two drashas. Hanaka applies to an Amma, and our halacha here that there's no inheritance applies to an Amma. The Gemara now discusses one who was sold to an Eved Kechavim. So the halacha is the one who was sold to an Eved Kechavim cannot be inherited by the children of the Eved Kechavim. The Eved is not inherited by them. So what's the source for that? So the Gemara quotes Chizkiah, who says, "V'chishav im kainehu." Make a calculation with the one who bought him. That's only kainehu, he himself who bought him, and not the inheritors of the one who bought him. Now the Gemara learns from here and takes a detour into a whole different topic, and that's inheritance of a Eved Kechavim to an Eved Kechavim, or a ger to an Eved Kechavim, or vice versa. So the Gemara says, Rabbi says, you see from here that Mid'iraisa, an Eved Kechavim, is inheriting from his father who is an Eved Kechavim. Why? Because the pasuk here has to tell me V'chishuvim Kaineu, and not in with his inheritors. So you see that there is a concept of that if not for the pasuk, the Eved Kechavim would be inheriting from his father, the Eved Kechavim. Now, what about a ger inheriting from an Eved Kechavim? That is, if you have a convert whose father remained an Eved Kechavim, does the ger inherit from him? So Rava says, Midirabanan, yes. Midiraisa, no. Where do you see that? So he quotes a Mishnah. It says if you have two children, a ger and an Eved Kechavim, that are both inheriting from their father who's an Eved Kechavim, so two former brothers, the ger and the Eved Kechavim, both children of an Eved Kechavim, so the ger could say to the Eved Kechavim, you take the Isser Hana stuff, because you're an Eved Kechavim, what do you care? So you take the Einesach, you take the Avodah Zaras, and I'll take the mutter things. Now, the fact that he's allowed to do that, when he takes the mutter things, he's taking the fruits, he's taking the money. The fact he's allowed to do that means that the inheritance didn't go to their possession automatically. Because if it did, then he'd be trading the Isser Hana for the fruits that he's receiving in exchange. That means he's getting Hana from Isser Hana, so he's not allowed to do that. So, Midoraisa then, the inheritance was not Chal. It means there is no inheritance for the Ger from his father, the Eved Kechavim, in that moment. What it does say he's allowed to do is trade it, is to decide who gets one in advance. However, once they've already taken possession of it, he can't trade it. Because once it's already his, then if he swaps it, then he's trading for Isser Hana. Now, why is there an inheritance at all that he can't trade it? So that's Midrabanan, that there is an inheritance, because the Rabbanan were afraid that he would not want to lose his inheritance and therefore would go back to being an Eved Kechavim, and therefore they created a Yerusha for a ger from an Eved Kechavim, Midrabanan. So then the Gemara quotes a Bryce that says this as well, that when do you say this is only if they inherited, that's when they can't trade, but if they became partners already, then it's forbidden for them to actually swap. Okay, going further, what can an Eved Kechavim inherit from the ger? What does that mean? If the father was Megayer and the son remained in Eved Kechavim, or can a ger inherit from a ger? If the father and the son both father and son were both be Megayer independently, so now they're both gerim, but they're kekatan shenela, and therefore they're not really related. So here the Gemara says, Rava says, there is no inheritance, not their Reisa and not their Bana, not in either of these circumstances. Where do you see that? So it quotes a Mishnah, because if somebody borrowed money from a ger whose son converted as well, he should return it only to that ger and not to the son. And if he returns it to the son, Chachamim were not pleased with that, because the son is not his inheritor, so he doesn't have a right to inherit it. You shouldn't return to him. So the Brisa says that the Chachamim were pleased with it, or says it's not a kasha. One is they're talking about where he was conceived as a guy and was born as a yid, and the other is talking about where he was conceived and born as a guy and then he converted. Now, the Gemara quotes of Bar Avin, named Rav Yechanan, who gives a whole different source for this concept of inheritance of an Eved Kechavim. He agrees with Rava that a Eved Kechavim inherits from his father who's an Eved Kechavim, but he gives a different source for it. So what's his source? We have a few attempts here. So first of all, it says Ki Yerusha le'Esav Nasatis Har Seir. Esav inherited Har Seir. So how could Esav, who was in Eved Kechavim, you see he could inherit Har Seir? So says in 1 second, Esav is not a real Eved Kechavim, he was Yisrael Mumar. He was born as a Yisrael. So maybe that's different. So Gemara says, okay, I'll give you a different source. It says, Livnei Loit Nastati is Or Yerusha. The children of Loit got an inheritance, they got the city of Or. So you see that there is inheritance. The Bnei Loit were for sure considered to be Evdei Kechavim, not Yisrael. Rav Chiya bar Avin says, why Rav Chiya bar Avin, Rav Yechanan, why did he not want to say like Rava from the pasuk of V'chishavim Kaineu? It says he doesn't hold a V'chishavim Kaineu. It doesn't say Loyim Yorshei Kaineu. He doesn't see that there's a Joshua there. Rava didn't want to say Rav Chiya bar Avin because of the covenant of Avram Avinu. That is why they were able to get that inheritance, because their brother was Loit's nephew of Avram Avinu. However, a general of a Kechavim would not be able to inherit.